Hey, good evening, great Golden Gopher fans. Hope that all is well wherever you are. Welcome to the second season of Golden Dunkers Live. I'm your host, Eric Harris Jr., aka the defensive specialist. Yeah, I know it sounds weird hearing the word defense since no one is playing defense these days and no one is teaching how to play defense. But stay tuned. I have a solution for you later on in the show. Our first installment of season 2. Our guest tonight is a special individual. He's a great guy, first and foremost, and has accomplished so much both on and off the court. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation with my point guard brethren. But first, I just want to thank everyone for the support on Golden Dunkers Live Season 1. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned some new things about your favorite Gophers. If you want to continue to see this content, make sure that you follow the Golden Dunkers on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Once again, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And shout out to my guy, Keith Cook. Keith handles all of the social media platforms for the Golden Dunkers. He's a great guy. He's an amazing guy. He's a genius. And I just want to say thank you to Keith. And I think it's about time for him to get a raise, Golden Dunkers. But also, if you want to become a member of the Golden Dunkers, it's very simple. All you have to do is go to the Golden Dunkers website, follow the simple steps, and you become a Golden Dunker. Very simple. So thank you for all the support. With that being said, it's time to introduce this special individual. Like I said, he's a great guy, great human being. He's accomplished so much both on and off the court. Let's see. Let's run down the list real quick. Last time I checked, he was the all-time leader in assists for Golden Gopher basketball. I believe that still stands. Won an NIT championship as a starting point guard on the Gophers back in the day. Won multiple games as a Gopher, and that was just in the States. So now his professional career was overseas, and I was just talking to him. He won multiple championships overseas. He's considered a European legend. The guy has done so much on the court, but most importantly, what I think he's most proud of is being a husband and a father. So with no further ado, I bring to you Mr. Arriel McDonald. Rel, what's going on, man? Thanks for showing up today, man. I know you have a very busy schedule. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Love to be here, man.
How you been, brother?
Can't complain. God's been good. So just trying to stay humble, trying to stay focused, and just going on with life.
All the time. You still look good, brother. Hey, I got to know you a lot as of late. I didn't really know you because I didn't know the nickname 1-0, man. 1-0, for those that don't know, 1-0 is for his uniform number. Arriel wore number 10. Why didn't you tell me that was your nickname? Who gave you that nickname?
It actually was Randy Carter had a friend who was from Memphis, Tennessee, who in our senior season came to Minnesota. He was leaving Memphis, just looking for a different opportunity, and he stayed with us our senior year. And so he was the individual who actually gave me the nickname 1-0.
He gave you the nickname 1-0?
That's right. Yep. His name is Marcus Thomas. He was one of Randy Carter. Randy Carter was my roommate. And so when Marcus came to stay with us, he was like a hype guy who always used to get us up for games. And he always just believed, that every superhero had to have a nickname. And so that was the nickname he gave me.
Marcus, what's up, my brother? How are you, man?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, 1-0. So basically, we want to take Gopher fans back. We want to talk about your journey, talk about, where it all started for you. So let's go back, 1-0. You're from, now clarify, where are you from originally? Because I know, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Flossmoor, Illinois, which is a suburb right outside of Chicago. Very similar to, let's say, Burnsville to Minneapolis. So it's about a 25, 35-minute drive from the center of downtown. And in my senior year, my dad received a job offer in North Carolina, and he decided to take that offer. So we moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. So if you look at most Gopher, let's say, sports information, it will list me from Raleigh, North Carolina. But I only grew up in Raleigh my senior year. But predominantly, I'm from Flossmoor, Illinois.
Flossmoor, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, North Carolina, two basketball hotbeds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about some guys that you competed against and or played with during those early years, middle school, high school?
In particular, Townsend Orr, who was a Golden Gopher. Excuse me. Townsend Orr, who was a Golden Gopher. Tracy Webster, who was the point guard at Wisconsin. We all played in the same high school conference. And so I've been knowing those guys since like 7th grade, just coming up through middle school and also high school. So those were the two individuals who really kind of pushed me as a basketball player, trying to be better than them, because for those guys, they had all the pub and all the publicity and things of that nature. So those were the guys that I was always trying to keep up with. And Townsend, ironically decided to sign at the University of Minnesota and played alongside me. And, just a really good friend. And, that's just about it.
Tracy Webster, Townsend Orr, two great guys. I happen to know both of them, but I could imagine those battles you guys had back in high school. And ironically, T.O. decides to come to you. He signed first or you signed first?
I ended up signing first, and I was actually quite surprised that he would sign with the University of Minnesota, being that we played the same position. When Clem recruited both of us, he was in the mind frame after probably my freshman year of moving me to the 2 position, because he believed in my jump shot a little bit more than my point guard skills, and he wanted to move Townsend to the point guard position. But they recruited a young talent and a very good player, my sidekick, Vashawn Leonard. So probably a difficult decision for Coach Haskins, but one that I'm grateful for, that he gave me the opportunity to lead and kind of let me be the driver of the bus.
That's big time. You mentioned Coach. We'll get into him in a minute. But what was the deal? What sealed the deal for you? Did you come up on a visit to the university, or how did that process go?
It was kind of a process where when I came on a visit, the person who hosted me was Richard Coffey and Walter Baum. And so probably what created the biggest impression on me was Richard Coffey. At that time, Richard was a grown man. He wasn't just the regular college student. Richard was living off campus. Richard was in a very committed relationship and had a very serious kind of presentation about himself. And that created an impression on me, because for my vision for myself being a collegiate player and was going to go attend the University of Minnesota, what I saw with Richard Coffey and how he was living and how he was progressing his path into becoming an adult that was going to leave college, that was something similar to what I wanted to be like. So that impression that Richard put on me was very, very key. And the idea that I did want to play for an African-American coach. I had never played for one before. And my dream school was either North Carolina or Georgetown. And I, always grew up watching John Thompson and thought that would be a person that I would enjoy playing for. So when the University of Minnesota came into the picture and started recruiting me, definitely the idea of playing for an African-American coach was appetizing.
Yes, sir. Richard's big time. What's up, Mr. Coffey? Hope all is well. What were the last 3 on your list? What did it come down to in terms of schools?
My probably top 3 at the time was not, I won't say top 3, but there were a list of 4 or 5 schools at the particular time. Kansas was recruiting me. but that was Roy Williams' first year as a head coach. He had just left North Carolina, and so he had taken the Kansas job. But at that time, I believe that Kansas was disqualified from playing in the tournament for probably 1 or 2 years. So for me, that was key because I wanted to play in the NCAA tournament and Kansas wouldn't be available. My second choice, or one of the higher ups, was Ohio State. Jim Jackson was in my class, and I got to know Jimmy well just going through all of the high school all-star camps. And so Ohio State was big. And Randy Ayers, who was an African-American coach. I liked the idea of playing for him. I knew Jim was really special and that playing for Ohio State would be a great honor. The other one was North Carolina State, but North Carolina State, similar to Kansas, had fallen on a similar kind of violation, NCAA violation, where they weren't allowed to play in the tournament. And also as well, I would probably have to play behind Chris Corciani for 2 seasons because it was he and Rodney Monroe, Fire and Ice, they used to call them. They were the backcourt for NC State. Minnesota was in the picture as well. And then, once again, I always wanted to play for North Carolina, but at that time, I came out with Kenny Anderson, who was one of the hottest recruits in high school history at that particular time. And North Carolina was waiting on Kansas. So I went on ahead and just decided to sign at the University of Minnesota. And, the rest is history.
So you were big time. The Gophers were lucky to land you 1-0. Talked about Kenny Anderson. We talk about Kenny all the time. So this is a perfect segue.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I didn't know this, but you happen to be on that 1990 Elite 8 team. I didn't know that, but you were on that team. Can you talk about that team, Coach Haskins, the characters on that team? Can you go into that a little bit?
Just a very special team because although they were great basketball players and worked extremely hard, they were a close-knit group. They had been through so much, and through their journey of going through things, they really bonded together. And so it was very difficult as a 155-pound, 6'3" freshman coming in and commanding a position. When Coach Haskins recruited me, he had every intention in allowing me to be a starting point guard because he felt that I could handle the position. But I wasn't ready for the challenge, and I was the one who approached him and asked him, could I be redshirted? Because I just didn't feel that I could physically compete. The Reverend, he's now a Reverend, the Reverend Connell Lewis, who wasn't a Reverend in the past, he made it very, very difficult for me to command any minutes on that team. And so it was a great learning lesson because he beat me up pretty good and talked to me bad every single day. But he was the one who started that process of building mental toughness because playing for Clem Haskins, you had to have that. And that was a special team. And in making that decision, and Clem agreed that I would be redshirted, we had that final 8 game where we played against Georgia Tech. And so many fans don't remember or probably didn't even notice, but Coach Haskins actually asked me to dress for that game. And he had every intention in putting me in that game. He actually called my name, and I was on the way to the scorer's table. And it was Coach McKinney and it was Coach Brown who kind of grabbed me by my pant leg and threw me back into the bench and said, no, he's not playing. We're not doing that. So, but I think the idea was that, that I understood Kenny Anderson. Kenny, I think that night had 29. Brian Oliver had 28. And then you had the shooter that played for the Orlando Magic. I can't remember his name. Shaq's buddy, the shooter, Dennis Scott. Dennis Scott had 40. So I think the only 2 players there were the only 3 players that scored that evening. And I think Matt Geiger had 2 or 4 points. But I think Coach Haskins' mind frame was, I need someone to slow down Kenny. And I knew Kenny very well.
Kenny was phenomenal, in my opinion. One of the best, if not the best players, high school players ever from New York City. Yeah. Gopher fans, we don't want to relive that moment. We all know what took place that game. I'm not going to mention it, but we all know what took place. But some demanding personalities. You mentioned Richard Coffey, Connell Lewis, Walter Baum, Melvin Newbern, Willie Burton. that team was just amazing, man. And I know it had to be a pleasure for you to go along for that ride.
Absolutely.
So talk about Coach Haskins, Rel. I want you to talk about, you mentioned you want to play for an African-American coach. I want to talk to you about what he meant to you, not only then as a player, but the lasting imprint that he left on your life. I always said, I know your mom met him. When Coach Haskins meets a mom, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
It's pretty much over because mom is going to want you to go in and play for a gentleman like that. Can you talk about Coach Haskins a little bit?
Coach was a very good motivator, and he's always been a father figure to many of our players. We had many players that didn't have a father that they grew up with, but I was from a 2-parent home. I always equate myself to Theo from the Cosby Show. My family was very affluent. My family had. I didn't know anything about the hardships of life. I grew up very, very fortunate. Some would say a spoon in my mouth, but I don't believe that to be true because my mother and father worked very, very hard and made me work very, very hard. So what I needed from Clem was someone who could guide me and prepare me for the dream that I wanted to embark on, which was playing eventually in the NBA. And so with Coach's contacts, playing in the NBA, Coach understanding what it took to prepare yourself from the NBA, that was very, very attractive for me. And that's why one of the reasons why I signed with Coach Haskins. But he had a lot of sayings that he spoke about, and they always stuck to me, especially when I became a professional player playing in Europe for 15 years. Those ideals that he instilled in us, all of us players, are very, very true, and they are very, very sound principles and ways on which to guide your life and to approach life, especially when you're talking about hardships. I can just hear Coach always saying, it's hard, but it's fair, but it's sad, but it's true. And so, all of those, we call them Clem's quotes, all of those really stuck with me. And I recognized that Coach took a chance on me. It was very, very easy for him to move me out the way and let's say, Townsend, or you become the starting point guard. But he stuck with me. He wrote it out. He always used to complain every day, don't ever bring me any skinny SOBs from Chicago or North Carolina. He complained every day. But in that complaining, it pushed me. And, through the raising of my mother and father, I never allowed anyone to distract me from my goals and my dream. So even though he would say those things every day, it really pushed me and motivated me to work harder, to not buy into mediocrity, to push myself to be a high achiever. And so those ideals, those principles, they really stuck with me. And once again, they really helped format the mental approach that I took in becoming a professional player.
Great stuff, Rel. So you have to tell the up top story. You have to tell it. You have to tell it. For those that don't know, Williams Arena, aka the barn, there's rafters, and within those rafters, there's like a lane where you could run around the arena. So Arriel told me the story about one day when he had to go up top. And Mr. McDonald, can you share that story?
Yeah. When I came to the University of Minnesota, there was the seating was different. So that on the third level, there was maybe about a 7 to 8 foot space that one could turn into a track, if you will. And we used to call that the Willie Burton track because every time Willie got into trouble, Clem would have Willie run up top. And so it was a practice that we were in. And probably during that time, it was non-conference, but I was playing really well. It was my junior year, and I was playing well. And, I was feeling myself a little bit. I was confident. And, I was really trying to build this mentality that Coach had pretty much introduced. But, I was, just trying to gain that confidence, gain that swag, gain that aura. And so I got a little lippy with him, and I I used some explicitives with him, and he disciplined me. In these days and times, coach would get fired. He would get fired without any question. But it was necessary to kind of bring me back to ground zero. And so he just kindly, smacked me by one ear and smacked me by another ear and shook me pretty aggressively and just told me, smacked me on the rear and told me to get up top and keep running until he tells me to come down. And so I started running. It was towards the end of practice, but I started running. So practice ended. And so when practice ended, everyone left. All the coaches left. So I start coming down the stairs. And he said, no. He used some choice words, but he said, no, you keep running. You keep running till I tell you to come down. And so I kept running. And so everyone was off the court. All the managers are gone. It's just me and that track. And then I see the players leaving. I see the staff leaving. Only he and Coach Kaz were there. And so all of a sudden he comes on the basketball court and he grabs a ball. And he just starts shooting mid-range shots. It's only 10 foot and in. But I tell everybody this story. For about 6 to 7 minutes straight, all he shot was mid-range jumpers, cursing me, calling me every name but a child of God, telling me, I hope you fall off and die. And if you fall off and die, I'm going to call your mother. And when your mother asks you, why did you fall off and die? He said, I'm going to tell her because he's a stupid SOB. So all of those things were, things that, were necessary during that time to kind of bring me back into the fold of what we were trying to do as a team. But I've never forgot it. It humbled me as an individual player. It got me back in line with what we were trying to do. I stopped thinking of myself and I started caring about more of the team and what we needed to do to become a better team. And so, I don't have any hard feelings or ill will. It was just one of those things that he had to do to help me become a man.
Yes. Jumper was wet, though. The jumper was wet.
He didn't miss. He did not miss for about 6 or 7 minutes. I don't think he missed because, Coach had the bad knees, and I do not recall him running after a ball. All of those things were just like raindrops falling out the sky.
Thank you, Coach Haskins and Miss Haskins, and to the coaching staff. You mentioned Coach Kaz, Coach Barnes, Coach McKinney. I didn't play for Coach McKinney, but I heard legendary stories about him. Shout out to his son, Lance. What's up, Lance? So 1-0. You witnessed some unbelievable phenomenons while playing in the barn. Mm-hmm. Off the top of my head, the first one, the Fab Five. You were a part of that phenomenon. The Michigan Wolverines, the Fab Five. You probably knew some of those guys prior to playing against them in college, but what was that moment like the first time they came to the barn?
It was a big spectacle. And, they had, those guys were a cultural phenom. And, it just made you as an individual player step your game up because you understood that these young men were in the media cycle and receiving a lot of publicity. So you always felt like you had to bring your A game against them. And, it was one of the most exciting games that I had played in as a Golden Gopher. It was one of those times where the barn was filled to capacity. And, I think the first time we played them in the barn, we actually ended up beating them by double digits. And it was just a great day for Golden Gopher fans to celebrate. It was a great day for us individual players to celebrate because we understood that they were ranked and that, that these players were eventually going to be NBA basketball players. So it was just a very fun day. Ironically, when Chris Webber got drafted, some of his highlight films, I were in most of them because I either got dunked on or he made this behind the back where he took the ball behind the back and he dunked it. And so my joke was, I told my family, I'm on the NBA film and I'm in the NBA draft. I'm just not getting selected, but I was in the film on the number one pick. I was in the film. So That was my claim to fame. But just a great team. Is probably misunderstood. From for many fans. Probably thinking that these guys were bad people, but they were good kids. They had a dream. They stuck together in a climate where individuals really don't stick together on a team like that. But they were very close knit, and I just recall Jalen Rose coming into our locker room, and he was in our locker room, and he was sitting next to me and Vashon because Clem had me and Vashon sit next to each other. But he came in the locker room, and Clem ducked his head in the locker room, and the next day he made us pay for it because he said, under no circumstances does any visitor come in our locker room, especially when they get done beating us.
That's Coach, man.
Yep.
That's Coach.
Yep.
That's great stuff. Second one, Rel, and I think he kind of gets overlooked in the annals of, great players, not only in college, but in the league. Glenn Big Dog Robinson.
Yeah.
I remember Coach Katie coming to my house. Purdue recruited me. His pitch was this. He puts in a VCR tape. That's when we had VCRs back then. The whole 20, 25-minute tape was Glenn Big Dog Robinson highlights. It's crazy. I'll never forget that. Can you talk about Big Dog as a player and what he brought to the table?
You know what? Marc Gasol is the best player that I've ever played against or with. But I played with Marc for 3 years when I was in Spain. And so Marc is the best individual player that I've ever played with or against. But Glenn Robinson is probably the most talented player that I've ever played against, because I remember we played against Purdue and we had a 9-point halftime lead. And when we came out of halftime, Glenn Robinson is probably the only player that I've been on the court where I can honestly say that he took over the game. And what I mean by that was he either shot the ball, he either rebounded a missed shot from us, he handed it off to Coach Painter, he went inside the lane, he popped out, he received the ball on the perimeter, and he scored. They went back down on the defensive end, they got a stop, he rebounded the ball, he gave it to Matt Painter, he popped in, he popped out, and scored. He literally took over that game, and that was a big game for us and a big game for them as well, because they were competing for the Big Ten championship, and that was Glenn Robinson's coming out year. So I have great affection, and I'm also a fan of Glenn Robinson because he was truly a tremendous talent.
Just a grown man.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Coach Bobby Knight playing against the Indiana Hoosiers. I remember, I guess it was my senior year, and you guys beat them by 50 in the barn.
Yeah.
You remember that game, and can you talk a little bit about Coach Knight? He was the first coach that I saw. He would literally curse out the referees all game, and they would never give him a tech, literally. Yeah. Can you talk about Coach Knight and that game, if you remember playing against Indiana, beating them by 50?
Yeah, Coach Knight, his reputation preceded him. He kind of had this approach that he was very aggressive, and he pushed referees to a limit, even beyond limits. And so what happened, they got accustomed to his behavior, and so sometimes he could get away with some things that other coaches couldn't get away with. But, in my time playing with the Gophers, there were many legendary coaches. You had Judd Heathcote, you had Gene Cady, just great coaches who had great reputations. Bill Fisher, just great coaches. And Bobby Knight was one of those guys that, despite him having those All-Americans that he signed, you got up just to play for Bobby Knight because you wanted to impress Bobby Knight. You felt like if you impressed Bobby Knight, that the word would get around, and then you would have that opportunity to play at the next level maybe. And so during that game where we had beat them by a substantial amount of points, I recall making a 3-point shot, and my emotions got the best of me that I actually smacked him on the bottom. As I fell out of my shot, I kind of fell into his lap, and then I smacked him on the bottom. And so in reflecting about that, I had to be probably the craziest guy in the world because I'm sure nobody ever has touched Bobby Knight. But I do recall that moment and just maybe getting emotionally caught up because I believed in our team and I thought we were as equally talented as Indiana. I thought we were equally coached as well as Indiana. Um, but the very next time that we played Indiana, they took care of some business, and let's just say they repaid the favor after that loss that we gave them.
Yeah, Assembly Hall was a tough place to play. So, 93 or 94, correct me, you guys go to my hometown, MSG, win the NIT championship.
Yeah.
I think that was 93?
I want to say 93, 94.
Yeah, because that was the year. I didn't have the uniforms with the Gopher on them. Yeah, I had the other ones.
Right.
And the NIT chip was big.
Yeah.
In the NIT at the end of the season is always people kind of look down on it, I guess, sometimes, but that's a big momentum push for the next season, and that brings guys together. Do you have any memories of that moment in the Garden?
Yeah, I mean, for most collegiate players, you always want to play in some of the best stadiums across the country, and that was our first opportunity getting to play in Madison Square Garden. Obviously, you dreamt about playing in the NBA and then playing in Madison Square Garden, but in the semifinal, we played against Providence, and then in the final, we played against Georgetown. So we had the opportunity to play against some Big East teams with, Big East coaches who had legendary status. And so I just remember I ended up being outstanding player of the championship game playing against Georgetown. I was, really up for that game. So, I felt proud about that moment because, over a collegiate career, what you're trying to do is create your brand or set some benchmarks where you can create an opportunity for exposure for yourself. So that was my first time being recognized for a prestigious award that would maybe grant me some publicity that would, command some attention from the NBA scouts, if you will. So, I was really extremely happy about that, and for our team to receive a championship that would, stay in history, in the history of the University of Minnesota. I was extremely proud of that, but at the same time, looking forward to the next season where we would have the opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament and compete for a national championship.
Yeah, that 94 season broke my heart, man. I remember y'all had Louisville down. Know what happened, but that was back in the day when you could only watch maybe one game at a time or two games. It wasn't all of these broadcasts where you could see every single game coming on. So I don't think the game was live, but that just broke my heart, man. Louisville was good, but I had them.
Yeah, at that time, we honestly felt like we could make it to the Final Four. I mean, we all looked at the individual teams that were in our bracket, and so we kind of just said if we can get to Arizona, we felt like we could beat Arizona because, we were telling ourselves we're from the Big Ten, the Pac-10 is soft. There's no way that they compete with our physicality, our mentality. There's no way that they could compete with it. And so being up a significant amount of points against Louisville, as I became a professional player, I started to understand how difficult it is to play when you got a large lead, because what happens is you start to play not to lose instead of playing to win. And so maybe we got a little uptight or, for whatever reasons, I can't recall. We just hit a block where we couldn't score and Louisville got hot. And so they eventually ended up beating us and then, ended, my collegiate basketball career. But one of those games that, if you're allowed to play after college, you can reflect on and you can say, never will that happen again.
Yes, sir. So your collegiate career ends, and how did you transition into going over to Europe and having a 15-year multiple championship? I think you probably won about 19 different championships overseas. How did that come to fruition?
It all started. I actually had a job lined up with Carrie Levin in TV sales. And so I was, preparing myself for that opportunity. And then I had received a document. Well, I didn't receive it, but I stopped in the office, and Carolyn had given me a document for Randy Carter, and it was an invite to a overseas camp. And so I took it, and Randy was going somewhere else. I think he was maybe going out of town to go to an NBA camp. And so I scratched his name off, and I put my name on it, and I sent it into the camp. And so I showed up for the camp. It was in Chicago. And then after a couple of days of playing and working out, my agent called me probably a month later and said, hey, there's an opportunity for you in Waterloo, Belgium, with a team from Waterloo, Belgium. And they only needed a guy for a month because their point guard had gotten injured, and they just needed a guy for 1 month. And so he said, what do you think? And I said, you know what? I'll take a chance. And so when I went to Belgium, we played a game like 2 days after I arrived against the best Belgian team in that country. And that game, I ended up making a last-second shot to beat the team. And so the team that I was playing for decided to sign me to a contract for the rest of the season. And so I was able to play the rest of the season. And from there, just started receiving an opportunity after opportunity. And everywhere that I went, my second season, I went over to what was the former Yugoslavia, but I went to the country of Slovenia, and I played for a very, very good coach who helped show me how to prepare myself and build myself as a European player. And probably, I think it was my second season there. So it was my third season in Europe. I had led the team to the Final Four, the EuroLeague Final Four, and I was, making $50,000 for the whole season, for the entire season. I was only making about $50,000, but my counterpart, David Rivers, was making $3 million. My other counterpart, which was Alexander Djordjevic, was the best European point guard, was making about $2 million. And then a guy named Delaney Rudd, who played for the Utah Jazz for many seasons, was making $1,000. So if you can imagine, here I am playing for $50,000 for the whole season, and these guys are playing for millions of dollars. It just opened up some doors as far as some of the top teams in Europe. Just opened up some doors for me, being able to lead a team to the Final Four, a team that had no names, a team that had nobody, but we worked extremely, extremely hard. People over here don't know work. Until you go to Europe and you play for a Yugoslavian, you don't know what working is, okay? You have no idea. I know people think, oh, we do this and we do that. No. Till you go play for a Yugoslavian coach, and only American players who played for Yugoslavian coach, you don't know what work is.
Wow, God is great. That's an unbelievable story. What's up, RC? My guy, Randy Carter, great guy, great dude. So can you just enlighten myself and our viewers on the lifestyle overseas? You mentioned some of your teammates. You mentioned Marc Gasol. You just talk about the lifestyle, what goes into it over there in terms of practice, food, just how beautiful, like my few years playing over there overseas is just a beautiful place to be and live. Can you just enlighten us a little bit?
Yeah, playing in Europe and just been had a tremendous opportunity and been very blessed to play in several different countries. I think it's 7 or 8. But what I enjoy about the experience is that I just didn't visit, I lived. I lived in these countries for 2 and 3 years at a time. And so in living in these countries, I also lived in some very interesting times. When I went to Slovenia, the Croatian and Yugoslavian war had just ended. So when I was in Ljubljana, I could see the effects from the war that had taken place in that country, and just, got an opportunity to know the citizens of that country and hear their stories as to what they experienced. I had the opportunity to play in Israel for 4 years. When 9/11 happened, I was living in Israel. So I had the opportunity to see how our sister or brother country in Israel, our closest ally, how they had to deal with the after effects what took place with 9/11. I was living in Greece when the market crashed, and many Greek citizens started storming the banks, and that's when I really began to understand that money is just a promissory note. It really doesn't exist. What exists are those credits that are inside the computer that will validate exactly what you have and what you don't have. So I was in Moscow when the shift changed from a communist country to more of a democratic or more of a socialist, if you will, country. So I got to see and live in some very, very interesting times and experience. And so what I share with my fellow Americans all the time is you really have to pay attention to your politicians, and you really have to be conscious of your vote, because we really don't understand how our foreign policy affects the citizens of other countries. And so if you are traveling abroad and you spend some time in other countries, what you will feel is a sense of, especially in Europe, is they don't really cater to us Americans anymore. We're not their most favorite visitors or guests, okay? Because what they are experiencing are some hardships due to some of the foreign policy things that we implement on their societies. And so I always share with my fellow Americans is we have to kind of scale it back in our arrogance sometimes of how we see ourselves on this global planet, because the world is bigger than America. And when I spent time in Moscow and traveling across Moscow, I think Moscow has 8 or 9 different time zones. And so it just shows you how massive that country is. But it for me, it just shows you how small America is and how we really have to be more conscious of some of the decisions. We really have to expose our children. I have citizenship to the country of Slovenia, which means that my son is entitled to citizenship. And so my dream for him through basketball is not to be on a 4-year plan, but to be on an 8-year plan. Because once he finishes college and he walks away with his degree, I'm planning on handing him a passport that will allow him not only to play basketball globally, but to be a global participant. That, if he finishes with a master or an MBA or a PhD, he can take this passport and be a citizen of the world, and not be so focused on trying to create his pathway through living in America, but being a global participant. So from that experience and playing in Europe, I certainly give God the glory, because I wasn't supposed to be a basketball player. I was supposed to be working a 9 to 5. But, working hard and praying every night, God gave me that opportunity. And in the preparation of hard work, I was able to take that opportunity and use it to earn a good income, show my family the world, not only my wife, not only my children, but my mother, my sister, my cousins, who all, my mother, one of the greatest experiences she had, she's a Christian woman. So one of the greatest gifts that I could give her was to allow her to go see the path that Jesus took, to go see Jesus's tomb in Israel, to go to Galilee. I've given her that opportunity so that she could take her faith and apply it to the scripture that she reads every day. So that's one of my proudest moments. I had the opportunity to meet John Paul when he was the Pope. When we went to Rome that first year when I was in Slovenia, we had the opportunity to go and meet the Pope, and I had the opportunity to meet him, shake his hand. So just, there's many experiences. I can go on and on and on, but certainly very, very grateful for the opportunity that God gave me.
Real talk, Rel. Hey, Bailey, trust the process. Yeah. Listen to the plan. Your dad knows what he's talking about. Listen to the plan. So switching gears, but staying on Europe and overseas, USA just lost a couple games in what was FIBA, right?
Yeah.
You know, obviously more than me.
Yeah.
But did you see, for me, the shift was in '92 when the Dream Team went and played, and I think that the spotlight on basketball really got intense after Europeans saw the Dream Team. But while you were playing or after your playing days overseas, did you see it possibly shifting to where European players would not only be able to compete, but maybe one day even surpass, the United States players? I still feel we're the best players. We just have to do some fine tuning. But what was your perspective on that?
When they brought about the Dream Team, to be honest, I was, a little upset because at that time, I was rated as one of the top point guards in Europe. And so my mind frame was, if they're going to create a team to compete against international players, some of the best international players in South America, like, Manu Ginobili, Nocioni, Ariel Nocioni, who played for the Chicago Bulls and was a very good player, Dirk Nowitzki. All of these players were playing in Europe, and players like myself were competing against them and winning. So from my mind frame, I was like, well, why don't you select some of the best American players who are over here accomplishing things against some of these top European players, and let's formulate a team in which, just like when they have national team break when we are playing in Europe, you can have USA national team break, where maybe we fly from Europe and then we get together in America, or maybe we find a destination that is located in Europe where we come together and work together as a team for 2 or 3 weeks to create team bonding, to create team chemistry, so that when the summer came, we would have that kind of glue that you need to have when you're competing against these European teams. I mean, take Spain, for instance. They won the world championship, but Ricky Rubio, Marc Gasol, these guys have been playing together since they've been 13 and 14 years old. So they have an advantage going in to the competition already, versus when you take a team of players coming from different directions, and even the great Coach Popovich can't glue that team together in that short a span. And so I think that they need to start looking at some of the American players that are over in Europe competing against these international players. They need to look to them and have an opportunity where in their contracts, they're allowed to take that 2-week break and then come back, or find a place in Europe where they can meet and come together and glue together and create a strategy to compete against some of these international teams.
Well, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think Gary Colangelo needs to put you on his advisory.
Even to the idea that you have American coaches like David Blatt. Most people think he's Israeli, but David grew up in America. So why not take a guy like that, who is used to seeing the international ways of how you play international basketball? It's different from NBA basketball. And so you take a guy like that, who is able to identify American pieces throughout the Euro League, or maybe even in South America, or even in China nowadays. He's able to identify those players that he would like to put together so that they can go out there and go ahead and compete against Spain, Yugoslavia, Croatia, France. If they did that and invested more time, instead of once again being arrogant, saying that, oh, we have the best players and we should easily be able to beat them. No, it's not. It's not that easy anymore. And with the influx of the European players who are now coming into the NBA, taking those skills and then going back to their countries and pushing those native players who are playing in their countries, yes, the international world has now caught up.
Well said. 15-year career.
Yeah.
You mentioned multiple championships. How did things wrap up in Europe? And, what was the transition like after basketball? because young people don't understand at some
Yeah,
point.
after basketball is always tough, particularly for a guy who's played a long time like I did. I mean, there's one thing to play collegiate ball, and then you have to assimilate yourself in the workforce and in just mainstream society. But then when you have the opportunity to play for 15 years and now coming back to America, it was a difficult transition for me. It definitely was, because I just got so used to things, the routine and the pattern. I listened to my mother and father, and they told me to go back and get my education, try to finish up my master's. So I'm in the process of doing that. I took a few years, 3 or 4 years, to just kind of smell the roses. I had some, business opportunities that, I was trying to build and grow. So I was working with that. But now, that my son has hit the high school level, I tried to interject myself into a situation where I could coach him. And, God gave me that opportunity now, coaching him at Maranatha Academy. So, I'm looking to build him as a player. And so the transition was difficult, but at the same time, I adapted to it. And now, just trying to integrate myself into the workforce. And, while I was over in Europe playing for 15, 16 years, other people were here getting their masters, getting some on-job training, building their on-job skills. So their resume was built properly. But for myself, trying to integrate myself in the workforce wasn't easy. No one would give you the opportunity. You start to get old, the grays come, you don't look the same. Your name doesn't ring bells like it used to. So I had to, kind of jump in line with everyone else. So, Clem built us to be competitors. He built us not to be quitters. He always said, it's hard, but it's fair. It's sad, but it's true. He said, many, many things that just stuck in our head that really apply to where we're at right now in our lives. And, I have no regrets. I have no shame. I'm just getting after it. Like Clem used to say, a-holes and, getting after it. You know how he was, man.
Blessings to your parents, and congrats to you, 1-0 on
Appreciate
pursuing the Masters. You said Maranatha, that's going to be your first year this year?
Yeah, this will be my first season there. My son's a ninth grader, so it was just perfect timing. I wanted to be a part of his journey, and he's got some friends that are young too that that want to be high achievers. I always enjoy coaching the high achievers, but been out for many, many jobs across the state of Minnesota. I don't take it personal. It is what it is. God's got something bigger. God's got man plans and God laughs. Man
Yes.
plans and God laughs. So I just stay true to the plan and staying focused with my son and just trying to help him obtain his dreams and his goals. And, I can't ask for any more because God's certainly been very, very good.
Okay, Ro, I got a couple more for you because I know you're busy. I know you're actually out right now.
Yeah.
Trying to get barely better as we speak. So thank you for your time. We have to address the elephant in the room.
Yep.
94 v. 97.
All right.
For those that don't know, point guard talk, 94 versus 97. Y'all had a crew. You at the point, Bo at the 2, Vashawn Leonard at the 2. What's up, VO? JP Walton was at the 3.
Yeah, Jay Wall was at the 3, Randy was at the 4, and Chad Colander was at the 5.
So I think you and I will probably cancel each other out. We'll get 10, 15, whatever. I think
I'll give you buckets. I'm teasing, man. I'm teasing. I had to shoot. I had to throw it at you. I had to shoot at you, bro. No, go ahead, man.
Hey,
go ahead.
Very talented, real long, 6'4". It would have been a battle.
Yeah.
But the 2 guard position. Now I'm biased.
Yeah.
Bobby versus Vo.
Yeah.
2 hard workers, 2 talented guys. That would be a tough one. I guess that could be a toss-up on any given night. Yeah. But I'm biased. I'm gonna go with B. Jack. Sorry, Vo. Yeah. At the 3, Sam versus Jay Walt. That would be interesting too, man.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Now, Here's where it gets interesting.
Mhm.
I always wonder, put Randy Carter in the room by himself with John Thomas,
Yeah.
see who gets out, or put Randy in the room with Courtney, who would get out. I would love to see them bang. But I think down low, those two, John and Courtney, and then off the bench what we could bring, I know T.O., shout out Towns, and I know T.O. was coming off getting buckets.
Yeah.
It would have been an interesting matchup, man.
All right, I'm gonna keep it short because my thing is my computer's about to cut out. I'm gonna say this. I believe your team would have beat us. And part of the reason being is your team mentally and spiritually were more together than we were. All of us players on our team, everybody thought they were going to the NBA. So that kept us from completely being together. And so I would say that your team probably would have beaten us. It was constructed different. You know, you had 500 pounds of funk on that block between John Thomas and Courtney James. I mean, you had guys that were literally touching their feet on the backboard when they dunked. And they were big, strong, could run the floor, agile, versus Chad was a little skinnier, but he competed hard. Don't get me wrong. Chad competed like an animal. Randy, throughout some of the injuries he's had, he had those bone spurs in his foot, so he never could get the lift that he always wanted. But he was a dog now. There was nobody any tougher in the Big Ten or maybe in the country than Randy Carter. But so that front court, it would have been a battle. I mean, it would have been some blood out there, but your guard play was certainly good. And, you know, the temperament of Sam and Bobby with combination of you and Charles, what was it?
Charles Thomas, Quincy.
Charles Thomas and Quincy. Yeah, I'd certainly give you guys the edge because, you know, you had a Quincy Lewis coming into the fold who eventually became the Big Ten MVP. So I'd give you guys the thumbs up for a victory.
Quincy was tough. Two more quick ones. One, real quick. Any Golden Dunkers memories from back in the day?
Steve Irwin, Don Broman, those were my guys. I mean, you know, they were always there, always just good guys, always stayed connected to us. A1, you could talk to them and you didn't have to worry about it getting out in the public. You could be very candid with them and say what you
think we lost Mr. McDonald. 1-0, you still there? I think we lost Arriel. But thank you for your time, Golden Gopher fans. Appreciate the support. Continue to support. As I mentioned earlier, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest. Continue to follow those outlets if you want to continue to get the content and follow your favorite Gophers. You want to join, you want to become a Golden Dunker, go to the website. It's really simple. Thank you, Arriel. Thank you for your time. Man, that guy's a great guy. I want to thank him for paving the way because without him, there wouldn't be no me as well as the point guards that came after me. So thank you, Arriel, for being a stand-up dude, great guy. Shout out to your family. And we thank you. We will be coming to you with more Golden Dunkers Live. Let us know who you want to see. Continue to give your feedback. And as I mentioned earlier, defense is a lost art. No one plays defense anymore. And on top of that, who's teaching defense? Everybody's teaching offense. So what I do is I teach individuals how to be defensive stoppers, lockdown defenders, defensive specialists. If you need help on the defensive end, don't hesitate. It's okay. It's not easy to teach defense, and it's not easy to apply what you're being taught in terms of defensive skills. So here's what you have to do. It's pretty simple. 1-833 lock you up. LOCK you up. Once again, 1-833 lock you up, and I can teach you those skills. If you can't play defense on a collegiate level, then you're not going to be able to play on that level. And I'm talking D1, D2, D3, whatever you aspire to play. You need defensive skills. Once again, 1-833, lock you up. Once again, thank you, great Golden Gopher fans. It was a pleasure, and we'll see you on episode 2 of season 2. Love and blessings. Peace.